Welcome to our channel Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. On a quiet summer night in 1963, a train rolled through the dark countryside of Britain, carrying millions of pounds in cash. No guards, no weapons, just a routine journey that happened every week. But that night, something unbelievable was waiting on the tracks. A group of thieves, ordinary men to anyone who passed them on the street, were about to pull off a crime so daring that the world still talks about it today. Without firing a single shot, they would stop a train, steal a fortune, and vanish into the night. What happened next shocked the nation, embarrassed the police, and became one of the most famous robberies in history. This is the true story of the Great Train Robbery. The story begins on a warm summer night in August 1963, across Britain. Most people were asleep, unaware that one of the most famous crimes in history was about to take place. A Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London, carrying hundreds of sacks of letters and cash. Inside those sacks was a huge amount of money, more than £2.5 million. For many people, it was just a normal mail train, but for a group of thieves, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. For months, a man named Bruce Reynolds had been planning something bold. He was the leader of a gang of thieves who were skilled, confident, and determined. He believed that if the plan worked, they could take the money without firing a single shot. But they would need good teamwork, perfect timing, and a little luck. Bruce Reynolds brought together a group of 15 men, each chosen for a specific skill. Some were experienced burglars. Some were strong and able to move heavy loads. One man had knowledge of trains. Another had military-style discipline. Together, they formed a team that was ready for one of the greatest heists ever attempted. The gang learned that the train carried large bags of cash on certain nights, especially after public holidays. They received this information from an inside source, known only as the Ulsterman. Whether this person's identity was ever confirmed remains a mystery. But the information he provided was accurate and extremely valuable. With this knowledge, the gang began planning every step. The Royal Mail train had a driver named Jack Mills. He expected nothing unusual that night. As the train moved through the countryside, he focused on the tracks ahead, unaware that the gang was hiding near a bridge farther down the line. The gang had chosen a location called Bridego Bridge, later known as Bridego Railway Bridge. This was a quiet spot in Buckinghamshire, far from houses and towns. It was the perfect place to stop a train without attracting attention. To make the train stop, the gang created a fake red signal. They climbed up to the signal post, disconnected the real wires, and replaced them with their own battery-powered light. When the train approached, Jack Mills saw the red light and did what any responsible driver would do. He slowed the train and brought it to a stop. He had no idea that criminals were waiting in the dark. As soon as the train stopped, the gang rushed forward. They wore gloves and dark clothing. One of the men climbed into the driver's cab. A struggle followed, and Jack Mills was hit on the head. He survived, but the injury stayed with him for the rest of his life. The gang told him to cooperate and made sure the fireman, David Whitby, could not call for help. The plan required moving the high-value mail carriage to a waiting truck. But there was a problem. The gang's own man, who was supposed to drive the train forward, discovered he did not know how to operate the newer engine properly. It was more complicated than he expected. This caused a delay and some panic. But eventually, it forced Jack Mills to drive the train a short distance so the gang could unload the money. The gang worked quickly, forming a human chain to pass the heavy bags from the train into a waiting truck. They did not take the letters, only the bags filled with money. In less than half an hour, the gang loaded more than 100 sacks onto the truck. The weight was so great that the truck struggled to move, but it managed to pull away from the bridge. The gang left the train behind, along with the injured driver and fireman, who soon called for help. The gang drove to a remote farmhouse called Leatherslade Farm. They had rented it weeks earlier. Pretending to be ordinary men on holiday, the farmhouse would be their temporary hideout, a place to count the money and wait until the police search cooled down. Inside the farmhouse, they dumped the sacks on the floor and began counting. The piles of banknotes seemed endless. When they finished counting, the total shocked even them, more than £2.6 million. quoted tens of millions today. The men celebrated quietly, knowing the police would soon be searching everywhere. Their plan was to stay hidden for a few days, then leave the farm and burn it down to destroy all evidence. But their success made them careless. Instead of keeping calm, some of the men spent their time playing Monopoly using real money. Their fingerprints ended up all over the board and on other items inside the house. Meanwhile, across the country, the news of the robbery spread quickly. Newspapers called it the Great Train Robbery, and people everywhere were fascinated. How had so much money been taken without anyone noticing until it was too late? How had the gang stopped the train? Who were they? The police launched one of the biggest investigations in British history. Officers searched fields, interviewed witnesses, and followed any clue. No matter how small, soon the police discovered Leatherslade Farm. When they entered the house, they realized the gang had stayed there recently. They found fingerprints, food, clothing, and the Monopoly board with fingerprints on it. This discovery became one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. The police began identifying and arresting members of the gang. One by one, several members were captured over the next few weeks. Bruce Reynolds managed to escape and stayed hidden for years, moving from country to country. Another member, Ronnie Biggs, also escaped police for a long time. Biggs became world famous later, not only for escaping, but for living a wild life in Brazil before eventually returning to the UK, back in court. The robbers who were caught received very long prison sentences, some up to 30 years. The severity of the sentences shocked many people. Some believed they were punished harshly because the robbery had embarrassed the government and the police. Others believed the sentences were fair because the crime was so large and carefully planned. Despite the arrests, most of the stolen money was never recovered. Only a small amount was found. Many people wonder what happened to the rest. Was it hidden? Spent quietly? Shared with unknown helpers? No one knows for certain. Over time, the Great Train Robbery became more than just a crime. It became part of British history. Movies, documentaries, and books have retold the story many times. Some people view the gang as clever and daring, almost like characters from a heist movie. Others see them as dangerous criminals who injured innocent workers and caused fear across the country. What makes the story unusual is that no guns were fired, yet the crime was still incredibly bold. It made people realize how vulnerable certain systems were, even something as simple as a mail train carrying cash. After the robbery, the government made changes to improve security. Mail trains began using stronger locks, better lighting, and more guards. The robbery forced Britain to modernize the way money was transported. As the years passed, the robbers grew older. Some died in prison, while others lived long lives after serving their time. Bruce Reynolds was eventually caught, served his sentence, and later wrote about his experiences. Ronnie Biggs became a symbol of rebellion to some people, though his escape overshadowed the seriousness of the crime. When he finally returned to the UK voluntarily, he was too ill to avoid prison. He died years later after being released on compassionate grounds. Today, the Great Train Robbery continues to fascinate people because it has all the elements of a dramatic story: careful planning, bold action, unexpected mistakes, a huge amount of money, and a long hunt for justice. It shows how a single event can capture the imagination of a whole country and stay in memory for decades. Even though it happened more than 60 years ago, the robbery still raises questions. How did the gang receive such accurate information? Was the inside source ever truly identified? What happened to the missing money? Were there helpers who were never caught? And could such a robbery happen today with modern technology in place? The Great Train Robbery remains one of the most famous heists in the world because it was both brilliant and flawed. Brilliant because of the planning and teamwork. Flawed because of the mistakes at the farmhouse and the fingerprints left behind. It was a moment in history when a group of ordinary-looking men shocked the nation and challenged the police with their daring plan. In the end, the robbery did not give the gang the peaceful, wealthy life they imagined. Most of them ended up in prison. Some lived in hiding, and some lived with regret. The money brought them far more trouble than happiness. But the story they left behind continues to live on, reminding people that even the most carefully planned crime can leave clues. Even the most successful heist can change lives in unexpected ways. And so, the Great Train Robbery became more than just a crime. It turned into a legend that still captures the world's imagination. The gang thought the money would give them freedom. Most of them found only trouble, prison, or years spent running from the law. The mystery of the missing money, the courage of the police chase, and the mistakes that brought the robbers down continue to raise questions even today. As time passes, the story reminds everyone that even the most daring plan can fall apart with one small mistake. The train has long stopped, the tracks are quiet, but the tale of that night in 1963 still rolls on, echoing through history as one of the boldest heists ever attempted. For watching more amazing videos like this, subscribe our channel Crime Loom.